Tonight I'd like to talk a little bit about acceptance. Now, in my blog, I've been talking a lot about what I feel are universal truths. And I've discovered these universal truths not through reinventing the wheel, but through sharing my story with others and inviting them into a state of vulnerability to share their story with me. And one truth that I keep coming across that I find to be particularly true in my own life is acceptance. And for me, what that means is that acceptance is nearly across every situation the first domino to fall prior to any positive or negative action that I take. But more often than not, it is a strong correlation between acceptance preceding positive action. And for me, I tend to be frozen in insecurity or frozen in fear, often to the point where I am incapable of any action whatsoever. And so what I've found is that the most important first step for me to take, and often this step doesn't involve any tangible action whatsoever, it actually involves internal processes, is accepting what's going on around me. What's most critical for me in acceptance is accepting my place in the world around me. I've shared with you my struggles with addiction and coming into sobriety and the changes that has brought about in my life. And what started that journey for me was acceptance. In particular, the acceptance was that I couldn't do it on my own. And what it was work through my addiction. And upon asking for help, I received a tremendous amount of help. But that first request, that first positive action, which was scary and it was unknown, it was a leap of faith for me, was preceded by acceptance. And at that particular time, that acceptance was, brought about by a tremendous amount of pain. The pain and suffering that I inflicted upon myself, as well as many other people, but the pain that I was experiencing was finally enough for me to accept that I didn't have all the answers. In particular, I had no answers at that moment. So, one thing that I find to be particularly true and particularly critical for a truth to be universal or approach something of a status which can be applicable across many situations is that it's scalable. And so acceptance has certainly been scalable in my own life. I found that there was kind of this moment in my life upon finding sobriety and pursuing that path, which is a tremendously different path ever since then, is that acceptance, whether I knew it or not in those moments, was there every step of the way, prior to positive action. So to give you an example, in construction, which I've written a whole heck of a lot about, there was one day in particular that sticks in my mind, one among many, but there's one day in particular that sticks in my mind that was troublesome, to say the least. I had earlier driven our four-wheel drive forklift into a cinder block column, a finished cinder block column on a custom home, and ripped a large chunk of it off, and I was panicking. And then later in the day I made a pretty tremendous error that cost us about 4 hours, and I was overwhelmed. In that moment I was so overwhelmed and so incapable of accepting that I'd made those mistakes that I was literally frozen. And I found myself walking in circles, not really sure what to do or how to go about taking any corrective action whatsoever. And that's typical of when I get into those states of being unwilling or unable to accept what's going on around me, is that when I am fighting it so hard, and a lot of times one of the primary sources of this is realizing that I myself have made a mistake. When I'm fighting it so hard, I can't take the corrective action to move forward. And so for me, what's so critical about acceptance, and I'll expand upon this much further as we go forward together, what's so critical is knowing that acceptance in and of itself does not mean that I endorse what's going on. And it certainly doesn't mean that I'm satisfied with what's going on. It means that I'm able to objectively, or at least as objectively as I can in that moment, acknowledge and accept reality for what it is. And when I do that, typically I get to have a little more of a clearer understanding of the next step to take. Because when I'm in a place of refusing to accept myself or my surroundings, I often have no clue where to head next. And that's a scary place for me to be. So again, I'll expand upon this as we go forward together, but suffice it to say that the point I would like to convey tonight is that acceptance is the crucial first step for me to take in any positive action. Absolutely critical. And by no means am I saying that acceptance solves all my problems, because it certainly doesn't. But what it allows me to do is begin taking corrective action when it needs to be taken. And furthermore, it allows me to accept and enjoy the world I have around me. Because many times I struggle to see the good in the world around me. My perspective is somewhat skewed. So by practicing, and it is a practice, and practice, and practice, because I don't think I'll ever get anywhere near perfection, but by practicing acceptance, what I also allow myself to do is enjoy and soak in and relish in the good moments that life has. Because it has so many that I'm unwilling or unable to see because of this skewed, sometimes sick perspective that I have. So not only is acceptance the first step in corrective action, it's the first step in living a healthier, happier, more serene life. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and I can't wait to share more with you moving forward. And I encourage you to share your experiences with me, and together we can create a shared understanding of how to build a better life. And I hope that we can scale that understanding to how to build a better world. Thank you.